Once upon a time, there were four friends named Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The young men were members of King Nebuchadnezzar's royal court. One day, the king of Babylon had a dream, but he couldn't remember. So he asked his wise men to tell him his dream, but they couldn't. So the king told his guards to kill all the wise men. Fortunately, Daniel stepped in and asked the king for time to interpret the dream. And then he, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego all prayed, and they asked God to reveal the dream to Daniel. God answered their prayer, and Daniel told the king his dream. After that, Daniel became ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were appointed as officers in the king's court. The dream that Daniel had interpreted was about a huge statue that represented different kingdoms that would rule the world. The head was made of gold, but after thinking about it, King Nebuchadnezzar didn't like the idea of his kingdom being overthrown, so he decided to make a huge gold statue, and he set it up in a nearby plain for everyone to see and worship. Then the king invited all of his officers and the citizens of Babylon to come to the dedication of the statue. Once everyone was assembled, a messenger shouted, "People of Babylon, listen to the king's command. When you hear the music playing, you must bow down and worship the king's statue. But if you refuse to obey what the king says, you will be thrown into a blazing furnace." After the announcement, the king's musicians began to play, and everyone bowed down. That is, all except three people: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The king's men ran to King Nebuchadnezzar and said, "O great King Nebuchadnezzar, we bring you sad news. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have refused to bow down to your golden statue." This made the king angry, and he ordered Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to be brought to him right away. When they arrived, the king asked them, "Is it true that you refuse to worship the gold statue that I have set up? I will give you one more chance to bow down to the statue, but if you disobey, I will throw you into the blazing furnace." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, "O king, we will not bow down to your statue. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear that we will never serve your gods or worship the statue you set up." This made King Nebuchadnezzar furious, so furious that he commanded the furnace to be made 7 times hotter. The soldiers tied Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego up with ropes and threw them into the furnace. The fire was so hot that it killed the soldiers who threw them in. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego must have died already from the heat of the fire, or at least that's what the king thought. But then the king noticed something in the fire. "Wait," he shouted. "Didn't we throw 3 men into the fire?" The soldiers agreed with the king, but the king said, "I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unharmed." Then King Nebuchadnezzar came as close as he could to the fire and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out of the fire!" So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stepped out of the fire and stood in front of the king. The king examined them. Their hair wasn't burned. Their clothes looked just like they had before. They didn't even smell like smoke. The king said, "Praise the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He has saved them from the fiery furnace." Then the king made a decree that if anyone spoke a word against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, there would be consequences. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were saved from the furnace because of their faith in God. They stayed true to him and chose not to worship any other gods, even if it meant being thrown into the fiery furnace. They trusted that God had everything under control. So, kids, remember that whatever you may face in life, whether it's good or bad, God is with you through it all, and He will never leave your side.